This video will look at a simplified disease cycle of the Saskatoon berry juniper rust or cedar apple rust. Cedar apple rust occurs, rusts are all usually multi-host fungal pathogens, and in this case, this particular pathogen moves between junipers and Saskatoon berries. I mean, of course, you'll always find other ones that potentially will move between something like a cedar, an apple, or crab, or something like that, or a hawthorn, those types of things. But in this case, we'll look specifically at the juniper and the Saskatoon berry. So in the early part of the year, in the spring, in May, on the junipers, whether they're wild or whatever, usually wild, you'll find the one stage of rust. The rusts produce multiple different spore-producing bodies, and which represent sort of progressive growth of the pathogen. But on the small branches on the twigs in the juniper in sort of early May, you'll find these things called teleal horns, and they're kind of a jelly-like horn, and they look like this little kind of squishy growth that's growing up on top of on the branch of on the juniper, so on the little branch there, and then that will throw out the teleospores, which will move across and infect the Saskatoon, and those can move a couple of kilometers even, and depending on where you're located, you will have issues with rust, and other times you won't necessarily. But in the Saskatoon berry, it's going to affect the leaves, and what you'll see here is depending on the underside or the top side of the leaf or on the fruit, you'll see different types of spore-producing bodies formed. Basically, on the underside of the leaves, you're going to see these little spiky growths. That's pretty common depending on whatever it is. There's sort of these orangey swellings. But on the one part of the leaf, you're going to get a certain type of spore-producing body that's different than from what's on the upper surface of the leaf. Both are producing rust spores and rust symptoms, but they represent different spore types. It's really not that critical. But within the Saskatoon berry itself, you'll see these different swellings on different parts of the leaf and then on the berries. And of course, the berries themselves are the problem. So here, you can see the orangey growths, and everything looks kind of swollen and distorted and weird. So on the upper surface, you're going to have these orange little spots. They're not so swollen, they're just sort of a little lump. And on the lower surface, you're going to get these spiky orangey growths. And then the fruit themselves become completely deformed and look like a sort of a spiky mace or a ball or whatever, and they're orange, and they're definitely not edible in that way. And you'll often get an orangey growth, an orangey powder. It's very characteristic, and when you see sort of an orangey growth, you're going to think rust. And so once it's cycled through the Saskatoons in later part of summer, it'll send the spores back to infect the juniper again. I mean, you can get it cycling within the one plant, but generally you're going to see it on just the one. So this is rust.